Just waiting for Amira to join.
I would get.
Hello. Sorry, you all right? Sorry, my voice. The later the day gets, the croaky. I am. It's my sexy husky voice. It's not. It's nothing else. She says,
We
"How are
are so
you?"
going with sexy. We're going with sexy. You look it
I
well.
know. Thank you. Thanks. How are you anyway? How's your day been?
It's been a really good day, and I fitted in a gym workout, so I'm happy.
Yay! Oh, it's always good getting the endorphins going. I know I'm the same. Tomorrow morning, Tuesday mornings, they're my booster for the week.
Yeah, I love it. You just feel so much better. And I didn't
Yeah,
train Monday, Tuesday, so I was like,
yeah,
right, today is non-negotiable. I was quick, 50 minutes in and out.
yeah.
Hey, Patrick, nice to have you. Haley's here, so I'm just looking at everyone joining.
Well, hello everyone. Right, so do you want to start with a quick introduction with who you are? Obviously, there's some people on here that know you already, but who you are, what you do, and then I'll go, and then we'll get started.
Of course. I can see a few of you guys, Leah and Christian. Guys, so nice to have you. So for anyone that does not know me and only knows Jenny, I'm Amira and I'm a communication coach and conflict expert as well. So I work with clients all around their communication. So who I work with is really, really broad, but we tend to work on three areas. So how you communicate with yourself, how you communicate in relationships, so not just romantic ones, could be at work, could be as a leader, could be with your family, a lot of difficult family members out there.
Mm-hmm.
And also my third area is like how you communicate with the world. So AKA manifest your dream life. So that in a nutshell is what I do.
Sounds good. Manifest your dream life. Yeah, please. That's me. For those that don't know me, I am Jenny. I am a mum of two 12 and 14-year-old girls and a stepmom for two much older kids. I am a coach working specifically with mums of kids of all ages, generally dealing with mum shit, which isn't just the shit we deal with on a day-to-day basis, it's how we feel when that shit slips. So it's the mum girl, the negative comparison, the living your life on autopilot. So I help mums go from feeling really shit about a lot of the things they do in life to being empowered and loving the life that they've got. So that's me. So let's get straight into it because I am so unbelievably excited for all the wisdom and all the little tidbits and hints and tips you are going to share with us all.
Oh, thank you. I'm so excited to be here. And for me as well, it's a little bit of a different kind of topic for us to delve into, as much
Yeah.
as it is all under communication. So I'm really excited to kind of have a different spin on it. I can see a few more ladies joining as well. My sister's here, so she is a mum, so I know that she's going to really appreciate this.
Yeah.
And
Me
Haley's
too.
got two teenagers as well. Okay, so I thought we would kick off, and as you said, you've already got two teenagers amongst
Yeah.
your four children.
Yeah.
So yeah, do you
It's
want to
yeah,
share what it's like?
for me, it's kind of been a gradual thing. I think as your kids get older, it's something that a lot of my clients struggle with is kind of navigating what happens when your kids don't need you in the same way. But with that comes this whole new way of parenting and how to communicate with your kids. They want independence. They want to be kind of treated as an adult, even though they're not really there yet. But you have to kind of maneuver and adapt how you deal with them to communicate effectively. But obviously the conflict that comes with the hormones, that comes with the talk back, that it drives any sane person to despair at times. So that was kind of a big one for me, kind of the conflict aspect when they clam up, kind of how to not necessarily pressure you. Obviously never want to pressure your kids into talking to you, but when you know something's wrong and they don't really want to share, that's something as well I've really struggled with in the past. So any kind of hints and tips you can give us on that? I know there's so many mums out there that struggle with those kind of issues.
Yeah, definitely. So I thought what we do is we'll start with tips and actually just start with how to build like that really healthy relationship. And it isn't because as parents or as mums you don't have it. It's that at this point in the relationship things are changing.
Yeah,
So
100%.
change, like, and navigating that alone is a whole different ball game. So it's I always say, bring it back to this, like, what is the goal? Okay, so for your clients, it's very much, I'm going to put words in their mouth here, but I'm assuming it is very much being able to build a healthy relationship with their, I'm going to say child, as in parent-child relationship, no matter how old they are, that is open, where both parties can speak openly and freely, and also where both parties feel seen and heard.
Yeah.
That's the goal, right?
100%.
But you're navigating it through this huge change. And then, as you said, that's without us taking into consideration the hormones as well.
Yeah.
So let's talk about top tips first of all. And then I think I'll lead it into trust, because I know as well you've had a few questions, and they really, I think there's quite like a few themes that came out. So
Definitely.
I really hope we'll touch on it. But as you said already, like as parents and mums struggling with like opening up, when they clam up, they don't want to talk to you, and how much of that is natural and okay, and how much of that is okay, something's wrong, and how much can I contribute to influence them or help them to open up, right?
Yeah, and I think particularly because as a mum, you've always been used to, you know, when the kids are little, they jump in the car and they'd be so excited to tell you about their day and what they played with and who said what, and then one day that kind of stops. And I think that is such a big element of it. It's not about not just about communicating with the kids, but communicating the change in how they are with yourself, so you can kind of learn to deal with that a little bit better, if that makes sense.
I am so glad you brought that up, 100%. And I think when we get onto the conflict section, we'll come back to this as well, because how are you communicating with yourself and how are you feeling? Because actually, even I had a conversation with someone, this probably about a month ago as well, and mum, and they've got an adult child who's moving, and they were like acting narky and getting into conflicts, getting into arguments, right? I always say the word conflict because it encompasses a lot of things, but let's say arguments, right?
Yeah.
But actually at the root of it, and the root of that argument was because she felt she wasn't needed anymore.
Yeah,
and she felt like she was alone.
Such a big thing with a lot of my clients as well. It's, you know, one thing I say, God, so I've said it so many times recently, is you need to be the parent your child needs you to be, regardless of their age, not the parent you want to be or you need to be. It was such a big turning point for me as a mum, that I needed to start parenting my older kids as they needed to be parented, not how I wanted to do it.
Exactly. And the hardest thing to get your head around, and this is communication in whole, right? So whether you're a parent and it's with your child, or at work and you've got a team, it's not about you. It's never about you. It's about them and their needs, exactly as you said. And when you can nail that, and you can really learn how to adapt your behavior and your communication style, you are going to get the best out of them and your relationship. Easier said than done, I know.
Definitely.
So the other thing, so I'm going to launch into top tips, but just before I do, the other thing I wanted to say is that going back to the goal and the healthy communication and building that openness to try and help them want to open up, right? Sometimes they will and sometimes they won't. Part of it is exactly as you said, Jenny, is that they're fighting for their independence, right? So they're going to push boundaries. They're navigating this whole entire new scenery. So part of it is understanding, you know, when they won't open up, and that's okay, and accepting it. What you can do to kind of help them still open up. And also the other element of it as well is, instead of you, who else can they talk to? And accepting that that's part of the journey as well.
Yeah.
So the only other thing I was going to say on that is, I always talk about parent-child in the sense of, I don't mean this in the sense of, I want to keep this really simple because this theory can get complicated. I don't mean in the sense of, I'm a mum and I have kids, right? But a parent and child dynamic, when you're talking, as you transition and you're navigating them becoming teenagers or growing up, you want to have an adult-to-adult conversation. So I just want to put that in there from the beginning.
Totally
because
agree.
That's going to be an important thing, right? Okay, so should we get into top tips?
Yeah, absolutely. Let's go.
Okay, so first one is listen, right? This is underrated in so many levels of communication, not just with your kids, all right? Listen and validate their feelings, okay? So I want to give a couple of examples here because I think this will really help. So let's say they're going through what they had a tough day, whatever that tough day is for your child. I hate using that word, but child looks like, okay?
Mm-hmm.
And let's say you respond with, you know what, don't worry, it'll pass, things will get better, okay? Why did you do that?
Only on the basis that I had the same conversation with my daughter, well, it must be about 6 months ago during lockdown. She came home and said to me, she had this really big issue with one of her friends, had said something behind her back. Obviously, the world was ending. And I was like, oh, don't worry about it. You'll be fine. Things will blow over. Never thought anything else of it. And then literally 2 weeks ago, she said, remember when you said that to me? And it was such a big thing and you kind of just brushed it under the carpet. And it wasn't until she said that. And I think we might have just had our first call a couple of weeks ago, obviously. And I was like, oh my God, yeah. I heard that, but I didn't really hear what she was saying.
Yeah, spot on, right? So that, and guys, like that is a live example, which I'm so glad you shared, right? So I just think you can't get it any better when you've got a live example. Rephrasing it, okay? That sentence, likely, I'm putting words in her mouth, okay, because I haven't spoken to her, but is likely to make her feel like you don't care, it's not important, you're undermining it. And it's that feeling, especially as a teenager, that it's not important. And when you are a teenager or older, you're growing up, you're that older kid, everything is important in your world and your remit because that's all you have at that moment in time. So little tip, first of all, when you're validating their feelings, is change the language. So a question always works really well. So something like acknowledging, first of all, that sounds hard. Yeah. How are you feeling? Yeah. Or that sounds difficult. Tell me more.
Yeah.
So I always say use the language of it sounds like, because then you're playing back to them what you think you're hearing.
Yeah.
And at the same time, validating how you think they feel and giving them a chance to open up.
Yeah. That makes so much sense.
So that's
yeah. And I think particularly as well, like, yeah, I think particularly as well with kids of that age, everything is heightened with hormones and, you know, everything is, you know, we know that the brains aren't formed to adult level and everything is just, like you say, everything is selfish. They see the world through their eyes and their eyes only. That's only because they can at that age. But yeah, it was such a kind of light bulb moment for me. And I just thought, oh my God, I've just done the one thing that it must have just been after our conversation because your face popped into my head. I was like, yeah, I did that.
I'm so glad. And the thing is as well, I always say with any of my clients as well, whether they're parents or not, or whatever we're talking about, is that you've got to get it wrong before you get it right. Because like you said, you have to go through that to have the light bulb moment and say, okay, next time I'm going to do that differently. So 100%. I have a lot of respect. I don't have kids yet. So I have a lot of respect for every mum and every parent out there. And I will never, ever undermine the massive task that you have on a daily basis. So I just want to add that to every tip that I'm saying that. I know it's easier said than done. Okay, so next thing is, big fan of this, right? Open questions. Okay, so especially when it comes to when you're in a place and you feel really stuck and you feel like they're climbing up and you can't get stuff out of them, and I'm going to explain this in a bit more detail, but stay away from your closed questions, which are essentially questions where you're only going to get a yes or no answer.
Yeah.
Because you're already shutting down the communication. So think about your open questions, which tend to start with words such as how, what, why, depends on the context of it, because it can come across as patronizing and condescending. But how and what questions are really, really good because it will, you hope it's going to create some sort of dialogue. And when you've got an open question, one, stop talking after that and let them answer. And then it's on them to talk, especially if that's what you're trying to get out of them. So think about open questions. This leads into my next point though, because I think it's a combination of them which will work really well, is what do you talk to your teenagers about or your older kids as they're growing up, okay? Because what's important to you and what's important to them are probably really different things.
Yeah, definitely.
Right? So example, I'm going to use, I've got nieces and nephews, okay? So I'm going to use one of my nieces as an example. She's on some sort of app, which, I mean, it used to be TikTok and I'd be on it and I'd dance and I was cool. Now it's some other app, I don't know what it is. and she'll sit on it and she'll use it and she'll laugh at whatever it is and these people are doing, and I don't get it, and I really don't think it's funny, but it's funny for her,
Yeah.
right? So I'll sit with her and she'll show me and we'll talk. I'm not going to fake it and pretend it's funny, but I'll ask her, like, what's so funny about this? Like, why are you so engaged? Why do you love it? Right? So that's an example. But when you're talking to your older kids and as they're growing up, think about what's important to them and topics. So keep it light and keep it fun, because as mum and as the parent, usually there's going to be this dialogue with them that, oh, here she goes again, or it's always serious, or she's telling me what to do,
That's just
or
it's,
she's preaching.
yeah, that's just such a truth, because it's I think one of the hard things as well, and it's something that comes up quite a lot with clients I've got, is that being present and in the moment sometimes with kids, particularly older kids, when they're quite happy sat behind the screen or being quiet in a corner, you know, on the phone to friends or whatever it is, you don't get that opportunity to ask them those questions if you don't initiate it. And you have to be present and in a moment to initiate those questions. So yeah, well, what is she doing right now? Like my youngest maybe plays on the Xbox, or we had a couple of weeks ago, I sat down and tried to play GTA with her. Oh my God. It was just horrendously, ridiculously hard. I didn't know what I was doing, but it was 10 minutes where I was kind of connecting with her on a different level, asking her stupid questions. And it doesn't, you know, light me up, but the fact that I just had 10 minutes with her doing something that she was willing to talk about was such a big thing.
Honestly, like spot on. And the fact you did it, and exactly as you said, it didn't light you up,
Yeah.
but she's going to remember that. And that's a connection where she'll feel like mum's relatable.
Mm.
Okay, great. Like mum played that with me. So that is huge. And even if my sister's still here, we were talking about this the other day, and her kids are so my nephews are slightly younger. They are, I have to get it right now, 7 and 10. And with the eldest though, she was like, when they come home from school these days, she's like, I really want to make sure that I'm present. So
Yeah.
in the past, she might be doing the ironing or trying to multitask, and that's mum life, right?
Oh
And
God,
Jenny,
yeah.
you know far better than me, okay? But actually, it's not saying you're going to be present in every minute of every day, because you won't. But actually, what are the snippets that you can take and keep it light and keep it fun?
Yeah.
Like, what is important to them? So yeah, whether it's a game, whether it's me sitting with my niece, or so I think that's really important, because sometimes we
Yeah.
can forget, like, strip it back and keep it
Well,
simple.
yeah, and I think on top of that, you know, kind of, you'll know yourself, seeing your sister and even your mum when you were growing up, the mum shit does take over. So you end up turning into a nag. It's, have you tidied your bedroom? Have you done your homework? Have you taken your shoes off? Have you put your uniform away? That communication tends to be the only communication you have with kids if you don't make an effort to open it up to things that are a little bit more light-hearted and fun. And you do just turn into a nag.
Definitely, definitely. So I think that is a really simple and effective thing to really help open up that conversation. Okay, next couple, I'm going to give you two more,
Mm-hmm.
and then I'll kind of wrap up the top tips. So, other one, I know you and I talked about this quite a lot, right? And we'll talk about this more when we kind of move on to the conflict situation. You're like, what's she going to say? Language,
Yeah.
language.
Yes, such
Okay,
a biggie.
right?
Mm-hmm.
So, I'm going to use the example that I'll talk about more when we do conflict, but how many times you say, like you said, have you done this? Have you done that? Or especially in an argument situation, you're this. Or how many parents listening or watching this back say, you're not like your sister, or I wish you'd just do this like your brother?
Yeah. Yeah, it is
Okay,
something I stopped myself. I think I can't remember where I heard this, read this, saw this a few years back, but it's something I am so conscious of doing.
exactly. So language is key in how you communicate with them, because everything that comes out your mouth is going to have impact on how they feel. So I always say, really simple tool, switch the you for an I. Like, and especially as well, I think, Jenny, we talked about an example a couple of weeks ago when we were chatting, and I think you were saying, tell me if this is you or your client, because otherwise I'm not doing you justice.
No, go on.
I think you came home and you were like the kids had cooked dinner and it was great, but actually the kitchen was still in a mess and I just
Yes.
wanted it tidy,
Yeah. Yeah, that's
right?
it. Yeah, they come home and they make the effort and they make the food, but then I'm sat there thinking, yeah, it was nice not to have to cook tea, but now the kitchen's an absolute shithole. and I'm the one
Right.
that's got to do it. And then I get on the back. I'm like, yeah, tea was really nice, but look at the mess you've left. So the whole positive straight into a negative without even taking that moment to appreciate the time and the effort that they put into it. So it's all kind of invalidated for them. It's yeah.
Exactly. And for them, it will start their internal dialogue as to like, why do I bother?
Yeah.
Well, I'm not going to do it because mum's never happy, right?
Yeah,
So
100%.
there's a couple of things actually to pull out, right? So language is in the sense of one, praising, and really, like you said, acknowledging and being in that moment and praising them, because praise is so important. And it doesn't, there's that thing sometimes of that misconception that the older they get, they don't need it. Yes, they do. They
Well,
really, truly do.
yeah, but even that can go back to even to you and I now. When somebody says you've done a good job, you still have that moment of being, oh, thanks. You
It's
do,
true.
regardless of the age. Yeah,
Definitely, and even one of my friends, going off topic a little bit, said the other day at work, she was like, "I just want my boss to appreciate me," and she was like, "He never tells me." So it's same thing, right? Same thing
yeah,
as a parent as well. So definitely that, and also as well, so taking the moment to really praise and acknowledge them, but also thinking about actually like the language. So you can still communicate your boundaries and your expectations, and we'll talk about that in a little bit, but actually rephrasing how you feel as to the fact that you still need to wash up or you need to clean the
mm,
kitchen. So something along the lines of, thank you guys, or thank you kids, whatever you call them, probably by their names.
yeah,
I appreciate this, and this dinner was fabulous, and I'm so happy I haven't had to cook. However, after a long day, I feel like exhausted at the thought of having to clean up because
yeah.
it's
So I
you,
feel
and
exhausted. Yeah, that's such a
yeah,
good
and
way of
only
putting it.
it.
Yeah, and that, yeah, it's
Exactly.
such a good way of because I'm so conscious. I think after our first conversation, I said to you, I got kind of so many little bits out of it that I've tried to implement, but it's like I've got to pause after every word to think about what I'm going to say. Does that make sense? Because I don't want to say the wrong thing and then annoy them or, and I get it, it's just something I guess that it's practice, isn't it? And the more you do it, the more you implement it, the more it kind of just becomes natural. Um,
Definitely. And sometimes you'll say something and then you'll be like 2 minutes later, God, I shouldn't have said that.
yeah, yeah,
And it is, you just got to get it wrong. And like you said, yeah, you feel like you're in slow motion as well because you're like, wait, I've got to watch this. Okay, I want to reframe this. But honestly, like that's the way that it will then become a habit.
yeah, definitely. That's
So
such a
my
good point.
last hot tip.
Yeah,
Yeah, exactly.
yeah.
Definitely. Sorry, I get so excited, Jenny. I'm just talking over you.
It's all right. I'm exactly the same. We're fine.
So last top tip, and this is to give a little bit of food for thought in a different direction, right?
Hmm.
When you're communicating, it's not just about talking. And I will take this back to love languages, okay? So when I'm talking around communicating in your relationship, I always talk about love language. It is one of the first things I do, especially if I'm working with a client who will come to me and say X, Y, and Z in my relationship, which is usually I can't communicate or I'm struggling to open up or I retreat or I lash out, right?
Hmm.
Love language is still relevant to kids, okay? So it isn't always about talking. So as much as a parent, you want them to open up and you want them to talk. Sometimes what is going to a really useful way to help communicate with them is by doing. So even taking it back, Jenny, to when you sat with your youngest, wasn't it?
Yeah.
And played a game for 10 minutes, is actually what can you do with them? Because being present in that moment is also where conversations can happen
Yes.
because you are
100%.
meeting them on that level.
Yep.
So whether it's taking them out for lunch or taking them shopping, and I'm not saying it always has to be around money orientated things, but like what do they enjoy to do? Like where do they want to spend time? Because actually by doing, you're going to help them open up. Like
Hmm.
that is crucial.
Yeah. Definitely. That's such a huge thing, I think. And it's something that the hard thing is, I think, obviously, with lockdown and everything, it's been hard to find that, we've all been driving each other mad under the same roof and everything, haven't we? It's having space to yourself when you've been confined to the house. But even just going out and walking with the kids, but there's been times where they've not wanted to kind of walk with me and they've wanted to walk off on their own. And it's having just the ability to step back and think, right, well, if that's what they want to do, let them do it. That's fine. It's not a reflection of me as a mum. They just kind of need to do them. But then we'll kind of sit and have a game of cards, or we'll do something together as a family, I think, which we can all enjoy doing, which does is it's so amazing how much the kids will sit down and they'll be like, this is unbelievable, I can't believe you're making us do this. And 5 minutes later, we're laughing and having fun and talking about things we wouldn't have been otherwise.
I love that. I love that. And you're right, it's balance. So I don't think it's natural for your older kids to want to spend every minute of every day with you. Like, it's part of growing up, and it is this tussle and this fight for their independence. They're pushing boundaries, and we'll go into that in a lot more detail. So it's really about, like you said, it's hard. It's a hard lesson as a parent to have to accept, okay, they don't need me as much. Okay, this is a moment where I have to step back. But actually, if you can just adapt a little bit, and like you said, find those moments where, okay, cool, where are we going to have that family time? Whether we're sitting down for a meal, and that's where conversation comes, whether it's playing a game, whether it's baking together, whatever it is. So I think that, like, beautiful example.
Yeah, it's definitely something I think that a lot of parents struggle with, and I think the hard part with something like that is, again, it's going to, I know, using coaching terms, but reframing the situation. So instead of it being about me, like when the kids don't want to spend time with me or my husband, or when they don't want to come on a walk, or when they don't want to help, or we get one word answers, or, you know, they have moments where they talk to you like shit because they're just that way out. It's having that insight to say, that's not about me. That's not about the kind of mum I am. It's not about the kind of person I am. They're being like that because they're just not feeling great today. And it's knowing, because that for me, again, I know we're going into conflict to a certain point now, but that is where it is so easy for it to turn into any kind of conflict. It's what do you mean? You can't talk to me like that. That's when that can so easily flip on its head and turn into, you know, World War III. Are we on now, or 4? Who knows these days?
I know we have to think about that.
Yeah.
I don't know. I think that's really good that you said that. And also you touched on as well, which I know we won't delve into like in this session, but around, like, as a mum and as a parent, your own internal dialogue. Like, we have, all of us have our internal dialogue in, like, as human beings, right? So now you've got another layer as a mum or as a parent, and actually that internal dialogue, and exactly as you say, reframing that. So it goes back to, like, your key niche around mumship.
Yeah, 100%, 100%. It's such a huge thing, and I think it's so important. It just surprises me, the more, you know, the more clients I speak to, the more people I speak to that aren't aware that just being present sometimes and aware of your own thoughts, you know, that it goes back to the thoughts done. You are not your thoughts. You are, you know, it's huge how many people, you know, aren't aware of how much power you can get back by just being more present, being more conscious, and being more aware of the thoughts that come into your head every day. It blows my mind.
Yeah.
But anyway,
And you're
that's a
so
whole
right.
new topic.
I know, I was like,
3 hours later. Excuse me. Yeah.
Yeah, you're so right. All I was going to add on that was that in our world today, as it looks, is that you've got distractions left, right, and center. So being still and being present. And I know, definitely using myself as an example, for so long I was good at being busy. Like, why I was busy, who knows, right? Busy for the wrong things, like not for the effective things. So actually, till you sit and you're still with your thoughts, but also then add, like, the mum dynamic on top of that, and you're already acknowledging mum shit and how busy you are. Actually finding those moments to be present is hard. Like, it's doable. That's why you're here.
Yeah,
but it's
100%.
hard.
Yeah, and I think it's like you said before about your sister, you know, as mums, you busy yourself with all the shit, with the washing, the ironing, the cleaning, the cooking. You feel guilty for leaving the kids to do the washing, but then you feel guilty for leaving the washing to spend time with the kids. It is a constant battle, but one thing I constantly go back to with clients is, what are you going to remember in 10 years time, in 5 years time? What are your kids going to remember? They're not going to remember. Yeah, they might remember if they never have any clean pants or socks, you know, let's be honest. But as long as you maintain some kind of balance, if shit slips, then it's not the end of the world. And again, this is another whole new topic that I could talk about for hours. But it's having that communication with yourself to be able to say, right, I'm not going to get all the shit done today, but I'm going to spend time with my kids because that's what's important. Or I'm going to be present for the next half an hour with my husband, with my partner, with my kids, you know, with myself, whatever that is. But just being able to communicate that with yourself without having the shit of guilt and comparison and everything else that flows. I could talk all day about this topic, could you? Can you tell? Sorry.
No, don't worry. There's a lot to get through as well. Well,
Goodness.
it links in really nicely because I was going to just talk a little bit around, and then we'll get straight into conflict. Because I feel like that's probably where a lot of the questions came, and I also feel like there's a lot for us to get into. But just quickly to kind of build on those top tips, I was going to say, as parents and you navigating the change in the relationship as your kids get older and what your role is and how your role changes and how they view you is around as well. Really important part is building trust with them. Yeah. And yes, you may have had it before, but how that continues. So just a couple of things that I think are important around it as parents are treating them as individuals. So it goes back to when I say really trying to create this communication style and this conversation which is adult to adult. So really understanding that they are their own individual, and like you said with the example earlier, that can be difficult when you're used to them being younger kids. You're used to kind of getting them into the car, like feeding them, dressing them, like taking them places, then really kind of like depending on you, and actually that shifting. So I think that is key when you're building trust with, to recognize that they are their own individual. Yeah. And that to some extent, this is my phrase, and it's not everyone will love this, but you don't own them.
Oh no, you're 100% right. Yeah, 100% right. I think even down to like with my two, they're both girls, they're 20 months apart, so they're quite close in age, but they are both totally different personalities. But I remember years ago, 2-3 years ago now, one of my daughters, my eldest, her bedroom was always a mess, whereas my youngest, her bedroom was always spotless. So I used to say to my eldest, why can't you keep your bedroom tidy like your sister? Things like that, that looking back now, don't get me wrong, we all want the bedrooms tidy, but there were ways that I could have communicated that better without implementing comparison, without comparing her to a sister and how she did things. And at the point I am now, both bedrooms are a mess, so nobody won. They're both a nightmare.
I love my lesson and I still didn't get the result I wanted.
No, the opposite. They're both a mess now. But anyway. But yeah, it's such a big thing. Such a big thing.
Definitely. And just to build on that, the other point I was going to share as well was around, as adults, we forget how important it is to share our experiences as parents, because growing up you can go through this real filter and this perception that your parents are invincible, especially when you get into the narrative of do this, do that, have you done this? So it's like your parents are always perfect and have things in order. So I think as well, to really build that trust is really sharing your experiences and being vulnerable. And yes, that is for every parent to determine where does that line end, because I'm not saying share your deep dark secrets with them, because you may not want to, right? And every parent has a very different style as to how they parent. But if you want to build trust as they grow up and you really start to recognize them as an individual, sharing what you've been through that's relevant to whatever they're going through
100%.
is important.
Yeah, definitely. Like, that's such a big thing. I remember a specific moment in my childhood where I realised my parents weren't invincible, weren't, you know, the be all and end all. They didn't know everything, and I think that's one thing I've always tried to communicate to my kids is I don't know what I'm doing half the time. We're all just winging it. You know, you read the books and you watch the videos or whatever it is, and videos. How old am I? You know what I mean? And you kind of you assume, you kind of just get you roll with the motions of every day, and it's so easy for the kids to think that mummy and daddy or mum and dad know what they're doing, but it's never that easy, I don't think.
Definitely.
But I do try and communicate to my kids quite a lot, and the other thing I do is delegate quite a lot. So if there are things need doing for them, I'll make them do some of the things that it's simply like school newsletters. If they need filling out, they fill out as much as they can and I sign it, and it's not then all on me to do all the shit. And so yeah,
and it empowers them as well.
Well, yeah, 100%.
Really,
definitely.
I love that. Should we get to the nitty gritty?
Let's do it. Down to conflict. Yeah, it's a nightmare. It's I think Hormones is obviously such a big part, and I think obviously there's the terrible three-nager, which is never a particularly nice age. Well, it is obviously, but in terms of the battles, but yeah, it wasn't until I think my kids started 11, 12 when the conflict and the drama and the, which is interesting. It's again, that's the age where the high school starts for me. So there was such a big transition in and change in my kids when they started high school, pushing for independence, pushing boundaries. Like I said to you before, they want to be treated a certain way. You have to talk to them a certain way. And then overnight, I went from this mum who did everything for them to a mum who had to parent in a totally different way. And I had no idea how to do it. So not only was I battling the demons in myself that were saying, my God, what's happening? Your world's just been turned upside down. Your kids don't need you anymore. I was also battling a teen and a preteen that knew everything.
Yeah, and that's hard, right? That is really hard, especially when it happens like that and you're like, wait, I wasn't prepared for this, okay?
Yeah.
So when it comes to conflicts, my biggest tip, okay, 2 tips I'm going to share, is you want to avoid it, okay? Because it's a lot harder to get out of it when you're in it, okay?
Yeah.
Now, when it comes to conflict and arguments, I'm just going to say arguments. When it comes to arguments with your older kids, stop fueling the fire. Okay, like stop adding to it. Okay, so that's whether it's your language, whether it's your body language, you're pointing the finger at them, you're blaming them, you're comparing them. Stop. And it doesn't come down to the fact that you're the parent, it comes down to you approaching the situation that it's an adult to adult conversation. Now, one thing I also want to say is that as parents, just because they're growing up and they're getting older, you'll have boundaries and expectations for them that you will not compromise on, and there will be other things you will compromise on. Okay, so as much as I'm going through this and giving a bit of a model around it, it doesn't mean don't have boundaries and don't have expectations. But I think really, and I guess this is for anyone that I guess perhaps is before the teenager stage, communicate and explain and sit down and talk to them about expectations and what your expectations and what your boundaries are of them. Even simple things as they grow up and they want to stay out late. An example, I'm going to take it back to me. So I remember growing up and my dad just gave me a curfew. There was no explanation of it. There was no why. And for him, my dad's African, right? So rules from fear, I'm telling you. And so his was like, I was a female and the fear of being out late, right? But there wasn't a conversation about that. There wasn't an explanation so that I, as somebody growing up, could understand that. So what did I do? I got defiant. And I thought, I'm not coming home at that time. And this continued for years. And the arguments continued, right?
Yeah.
So expectations and boundaries, if you can, to anyone that before they get to that older stage, I'm going to say secondary school, communicate and have the conversation, because not only does it allow you to explain to them what and why, but also it allows you to have a conversation as to what are you willing to compromise on and what are you not. Because there will be some things as a parent that you'll be like, it's a no-go. And some things, they might come back to you with a different perspective and you might think about it differently. And you might say, okay, actually,
but you see, this is so hard. We had an issue recently with screen time, like most parents these days. And we kind of sat down, and it was the first time we'd done it in a long time, and had a family meeting. It was all very official. We all sat down and, it was all kind of... and we put our proposal across, and the kids kind of put their proposal across, and then we were like, well, I'll compromise on that, but I won't compromise on that. The problem for me is when the kids get to a certain age, they have an answer for everything. So every time I was like, well, that is something that I'm not willing to compromise on, they were like, yeah, but. And it's like, if they ask the same question 30 times, maybe the 31st time I will cave and say, okay, then it doesn't happen. Obviously, I don't cave, but and again, this is, I suppose, another issue because my husband is, let's call him the good cop. So maybe he might cave after 4 or 5 times. And this is another issue, I suppose, with any kind of parenting situation and communication. You've both got to be on the same team with it. I think when one of you explain things in one way and another does it in another, it can open a whole world of pain.
Definitely,
But yeah, where was I
definitely.
going with that? I kind of went off on a total tangent then, didn't I? Yeah,
Well,
compromise.
you
But the compromise is so important. It's so important, and I think the fact showing my two that we were willing to budge on certain things because the arguments they gave, as much as I didn't like the arguments they were giving, because it kind of I don't know, I suppose for me it kind of made me realise that they are able to hold an argument, they're able to hold a conversation and a debate, and that was the whole me not, the whole mum and being redundant and that kind of thing kicks in. But giving that power back to them to say, well, we're not happy with that, but you tell us what you think is a good compromise. They were so much happier with that.
And two things that you've highlighted that I literally we can't move on till we talk about them because it's so
Okay.
important. Okay. One is when you said about them asking, let's say, the same question 30 times, as much as we might be exaggerating. I think it's really important, though. You're right, and I won't go into it around both parents have to be on the same page for sure, because I think otherwise, like you do play them off against each other. And I remember growing up, my mum and dad were a unit. Like you could not undermine either of them because they both had the same answer. So that, in that sense, that was really strong. But I'm not going to go into that. But the other thing is knowing when to like call it so that it doesn't go into that back and forth. And I know that's hard because you're also having the conversation to open up so that you can hear them and you're being present, you're willing to compromise, you want to listen, but also knowing when to draw the line and say, okay, you're now asking the same question several times. I've explained my answer, so we're going to end it there. And I know that can be really difficult, but that's a good boundary to draw. So I think that's quite important.
I had that literally 20 minutes ago in the car. My eldest I'd got them at McDonald's on the way home from school because they had to, long story anyway. So they were sat in the car and I've just had my car cleaned and she was like, can you pass me my chips? I'm like, you're not eating in the car. But why can't I eat in the car? I'm hungry. I'm not giving you chips, you're not eating in the car. This went on for 10 minutes. She had the face on. But I am starving. I haven't had anything to eat. Well, you can wait 5 minutes. We'll nearly be home. But it is. I can feel the constant, and I can feel Whereas before I would have been, that is enough. The chips are going in the bin. You're not having anything. Get to your room. That could have been maybe 5-6 years ago. That could have very easily been me. But I think taking that back and saying, right, you've asked me 6 times, the answer's the same, stop asking. It just stops. And I think, again, there's a lot to be said about communicating in that kind of more, particularly even with older kids, that authoritative kind of enough now tone.
Yeah, definitely. And what you've done there, which leads me on to the second thing I was going to say anyway, right? I always say, and I harp on about this all the time, right? Nobody taught us how, I'm really generalizing, but I am going to do a sweeping statement. Nobody taught us at any point to communicate effectively or how to deal with conflict, all right? Or how to deal with arguments.
Yeah.
It's not a lesson at school, right? So we learn as we go through life, okay? So when it comes to parents and their older kids and as they're growing up, right, they are also learning the behavior that they are going to role model later on in life.
100%.
So I can't even stress that enough. So exactly as you said, that fine, 5 years ago you would have reacted differently, and that's part of you growing as a parent because you grow and you understand what works and what doesn't, and like, okay, cool. And naturally we're all going to lose our temper sometimes, but if you think about it from I always do this as well, especially if I'm working with corporates, around how you behave at work and how you behave at home are different. It doesn't mean you're different people, that you're motivated by the different things, but there is a certain etiquette if you're working in a professional environment that you wouldn't get away with certain things. So also it's like part of that as well in your home life, especially when you're parenting, that she will remember how you've dealt with that as she gets older. And that will have like a really subconscious positive impact where she's like, okay, cool, because she will understand how you've dealt with it. So I think that is a huge lesson. And every time, like you said, you can feel your temperature rising, you can feel you want to get cross, but you also were aware of it in the moment. And the big thing about conflicts is knowing you're going to go into it before you do. Otherwise, it's going to be really difficult for you to adapt.
Yeah, there are moments, obviously, even now, I think for me, one of the biggest triggers is when the kids and you know, when you've got more than one kid, it's going to happen at some point when the kids are at each other, when they're shouting. Having two girls, I always see it as karma, because me and my sister used to argue like cat and dog about, she's borrowed my t-shirt and not put it back, and she's taken my shoes or borrowed my mascara all the time. It used to drive my mum mad, and my two do it now as well. So she's been in my bedroom, or so when I hear them shouting and arguing at each other, or it's not even shouting, they don't really shout, it's just you can hear the language they use, how they use the language. You know, it's very kind of short, sharp, doors slamming, stomping. That is the thing that gets my blood boiling. That I'm have to physically do my box breathing, in for four, out for, you know, all of that. And I'm like, right,
Yeah.
it will calm down. If it doesn't, I'll go upstairs and sort it out. But that's such a big trigger for me.
Yeah, and also you're so spot on around when you're a parent and you're getting into these arguments or these situations, is really understanding what's triggering you, because this is like a rule around any type of argument is if you don't know what triggers you, it's so much harder to be able to adapt it and control it and do something differently, right? So you're already aware of that trigger, so that is important. And most of us have more than one trigger, regardless of if you're a parent or not. So understanding that is really important. The other thing as well is, so sibling dynamics, I know there's always a balance of like, you know, letting them hash it out and also knowing when to intervene. And I think every parent's different depending on their style, their parenting style. But the other thing as well that I think is even more important is the aftermath conversation. So when things have calmed down, it's important to have the follow-up conversation where everyone's emotions are a lot calmer. And then it's about, I say, hashing it out, but in a really calm, collected way, so that as parents, you can understand why did they feel so violated in that situation. If they felt violated, they might have felt upset, whatever they felt. So if, for example, it is siblings, especially when you've got girls, borrowing things, using things, really having that three-way conversation to understand, okay, how did you feel? What's bothering you? It doesn't mean that it's never going to happen again, but you hope as well by creating the open dialogue, one, again, it's showing them how to deal with it. Two, you're calm, they're calm, and you can hope, you can never ever guarantee this, but with the other sibling, it's going to give them a different perspective as well.
Yeah, that's something that I've never actually thought of doing. With mine, I kind of leave them to it. I intervene if I need to, but I've never thought about actually sitting down after it's died down and having that conversation. Look, this happened for this reason. What can we do in the future to make sure that doesn't happen again? That's a really good point. That's definitely something I'll use.
Yeah, and I think it's important because as they're growing up as well, they've got their own values as well.
Yeah.
So, for example, something as simple as one of them borrowing something from them, they could feel violated because perhaps the other person, and I'm not saying this is your daughters because I don't know them, but won't look after it as much, or they feel protected. And I know definitely growing up for me, I was like, if it was me and my brother, for example, I really, really looked after things. My brother could take something and borrow it and it would come back broken. So for me, I used to get so upset about it because I'd be like, you don't have the same care with it. So I think that conversation is really important because it goes back to validating their feelings and understanding and allowing them to be able to share that. And also you can really, really hope that as siblings, they will start to listen to each other and understand. So for me and my brother, it became a joke.
Yeah, and I think there's a big element of that for any parent. When you hear your kids argue, all you want is your kids to get on, to be friends, be it when they're 2, when they're 20, you know, there's no difference. So I think that's such a big problem. I think a trigger for so many parents is you hear them argue, you instantly get triggered. It's, oh my God, my kids hate each other. And you intervene then and you try and resolve an issue that isn't yours to resolve, if that makes sense.
Yeah, definitely. Part of it is it's all balance, right? And you've got this balance as well. So it's balance for them and how many times you intervene and how often. But then it's a balance between your internal dialogue of why you feel like you're doing a crap job as a parent versus, and I don't know if my friend's still on here, but I saw him join. His name's Seb, and he's a single dad and he's a parent of 2. And I remember him saying to me, probably about a year or so ago, and he was like, Amira, what can I do so my son and my daughter are as close as you and your brother? And I looked at him and I was like, what? And he's like, I want them to have the relationship that you two have.
All you want as a
And
parent, because when you've got a sibling, you've always got somebody, and that's, I think, I was exactly the same with my sister. We fought like cat and dog. We argued over everything, all sorts of things, but we are really close now. And I don't, there's no magic formula to that. I don't think there's no kind of one thing I can say, well, if you do this right now, you'll be really close. It just doesn't happen like that, unfortunately.
exactly. And I think I'll just bring it back to, I don't have a watch, by the way, so you tell me, but I was going to make this kind
Oh,
of
we're all
like the
right.
last one.
As long as
Okay,
you're
cool.
okay, I'm okay. Yeah, no rush.
Okay, good. But yeah, and I think that comes back to really the conversations afterwards are really important because they'll understand each other's values. And even if they don't in their like teenage years, they will have so much more respect for each other and that closeness as you get older because you have a real like respect for each other. I always say you can grow up in the same house, under the same roof with the same parents, and you will become two completely
Totally
different
different.
people. And
Yeah.
that's okay, but it's how you gel together. So definitely for the conflict as well as parents, it's the other thing I actually didn't start with was acknowledging how you feel. So going back to the triggers, like why are you being triggered? So is it your internal dialogue?
Hmm.
Is it you're feeling shitty? Is it that you feeling like you're not good enough? Is it that you think they're arguing because of you? So one is always acknowledging, or are you feeling redundant? So
Yeah.
even when I said like a parent I spoke to a few weeks ago was feeling like not included anymore. So
Hmm.
acknowledge how you feel first of all, because until you do that, it's going to be really difficult for you to adapt and manage any sort of arguments you have with them. And then if there's stuff there that you need to work on, I'm going to say work with Jenny because that's important. And then it's really around what can you do differently, okay? You, as we said, don't own your kids. You can't control them. So it is on you to act differently and to behave differently if you want a different outcome out of them. They
Yeah.
are, especially at the stage they're hormonal, are gonna react. They're gonna blow up. They're gonna push boundaries, okay? Part of you as well as a parent and communicating effectively with them is knowing what the hard and fast boundaries are, communicating that with them, sitting them down. And Seb, if he's still on here, I'm going to show his whole life. He's not even going to validate this, but is really, really open in his dialogue with his kids, and one of them is a teenager, and his eldest is a girl. And I'm always like in awe of how he communicates with her because he's so open
Mm.
and kind of nothing gets left unsaid.
But I don't
And
think that's a bad way to be a lot of the time. I am quite like that with both my kids. And I think you can tell if they are receptive to that as well. I think they start being more open with you when you're more open with them to a certain point.
I think so as well, definitely, because they see you as well. Like you said, going back to what you said, is that you then don't see your parents as invincible, and I actually think that's a good thing because everyone's
Mm.
human, and if the earlier you understand that everyone's got flaws and everyone's good at different things, then it gives you a different perception rather than kind of going through with rose-tinted
Yeah,
glasses.
I think a big part of that as well is something that we've always done is apologise. And I think I don't know whether I can't remember having much of that growing up, if my mum or dad, unless it was like a little stand on your toe thing, but um, I can't really remember that much about people apologising or sitting down and saying, look, I'm sorry that happened. It happened for this reason. But that's something we do a lot with our kids. So showing our vulnerability that side by saying, yeah, I totally messed up there. I totally forgot. Or, having reasons behind it and showing that vulnerability.
Definitely, definitely. And then I guess like just the last thing to kind of wrap up, especially when you're getting into the arguments as well, is with the aftermath as well, acknowledging how they felt in that moment and seeing if you can delve in deeper. So that's where it goes back to your open questions and saying, okay, you came across, not you are, but you came across as frustrated or angry. You want to tell me why? Because then as well, you're going to have an understanding. Because I think sometimes can just put it down to hormones, but like, here they go again. So really, I just think that understanding and the dialogue, like the continuous dialogue, and that I am a big believer, okay, that it is on the parents because you can adapt and you can do things differently. And I know that you're carrying a lot of pressure on your shoulders. And that is part of being a parent. But I think the more you adapt and the more you can really like you said, you sometimes feel your temperature rising, or like you're getting pissed off, or you're getting triggered. But actually now, you're like, okay, I can feel it. And so in those moments, to any parent who feels like they're not at that stage yet, Jenny, where they feel like, okay, like I lose it too quickly, my tip is to remove yourself from the situation and don't just walk off. Just something really simple as saying, okay, I can feel this getting heated right now, and I don't want us to have an argument, so we'll talk about this when we're both calmer. Like something as simple as that, as signposting and removing yourself from the situation can be a game changer, because the argument can be so damaging.
Oh,
so damaging.
100% from both parties as well. You know, there's things that you say in the heat and things that they say in the heat that can have repercussions for days, weeks, months, years. And that is such a big thing for us, just to take that step back, I think, sometimes. The one thing, I know we are a little bit over, I did want to, some of the questions we had were about when your children don't want to talk, which I know is quite a lot of quite a big problem for some of my friends, particularly with well, maybe not boys generally. I think I am generalizing there, but when you know something's going on, but I think obviously from my point of view, I know how important it is when your kids don't want to talk. There's got to be certain boundaries in place that, unless you know there's a serious issue, that you kind of just leave them be. But is there any hints or tips you can give on how to maybe open up if all you're getting is one-word answers from your kids?
Yeah, definitely. I think it goes back to probably a few things I've mentioned already. So definitely it will take time to build trust with them, but they've got to feel like you're on their level. Otherwise they aren't going to open up, because if they don't think you're going to understand, they're going to shut off, like 100%. Also, if they're fearful of the way you're going to react to something, also another reason that they're not going to open up. And I remember as well, I think I was like 14 and I went through like some real crappy times when I was at secondary school, and something went on for a whole entire year and I never told my mum. So I probably see it more from like a grown up stage than I do it from a parent's point of view. And at that point in time, your kids are feeling and thinking that they can manage everything, that they can deal, and like you said, they do think they know it all sometimes, and that's part of it. So really, really being able to relate to them. If you're asking them constantly the same question, it's not going to be helpful. Sometimes, depending on your relationship and your dynamic, because everybody is different, but sometimes sitting them down and being really frank and open and calling it, like call it out and say, look, you aren't reacting or behaving in the same way that you usually do. Give examples. So usually really bubbly and chatty. Recently, I felt like you've come in, you've really retreated, and you've been in your room.
Yeah.
I feel that something's different and perhaps something's happened. Like, how do you feel about talking about it? So go back to the open questions, because if they're giving one word answers, you saying, are you okay? They'll say, yeah. 100%. So the open questions for sure is really, really important. I can't stress that enough. But the other element as well is, part of it is they may never open up to you. Okay, I definitely in my situation didn't open up to my mum. It's because a teacher called her. She found out, right? So my other point is, have someone else they can talk to that you know they have a good relationship with. That is probably as much as you can do. There will be some situations where they will not open up to you, and that is a very hard pill to swallow, because it's not about you.
Yeah, it's not. This is it, and this is, again, we're going back to being the kind of parent your child needs to be, not the kind of parent you want to be. I think we all get in our heads, my kids are going to be so open, they're going to talk to me about everything, and it never works as you plan it out. It never kind of quite works like that. So yeah, I think that's such a big thing.
Yeah, because my mum, like, if you got her on now, it'd be hilarious, because she'd be like, you were the most closed teenager ever. What do? I talk about communication, right? So it's not an irony, because it's why I talk about it, and it's why I'm so open now, but I wasn't. So you're right, it's not, and my mum was an amazing mum, like absolutely amazing, and it isn't about the parent. Like 99% of the time, it's not about the parent.
No.
So my thing is, have a backup, like have another person. I don't mean go and enforce it, right? But naturally around them, they will probably have either a friend of the family, a cousin, another family member, whether it's an auntie, uncle, someone that's younger, maybe a little bit more relatable. Like, if they talk to them and that's their person, accept that it is someone rather than no one.
Yeah,
That's
I
important.
100% agree. I think that's such a good point. And I think something else as well is possibly just to, even if you keep trying and your child says no, making sure they know by saying, I know you don't want to talk, but if you ever do, I'm here. Just such a simple sentence, but there's so much power in that sometimes, that the child knows that they might not want to talk today or tomorrow, but when they do, you're still going to be there for them.
Definitely, definitely. And one thing, even like my mum used to repeat over and over again, is she said, "You can do anything, absolutely anything, no matter how serious it is." She's like, "I'm not going to judge you, and I'm not going to be mad, and I want you to know that like you're always my daughter, and I'm always here. Like if there's any trouble,
Reassurance.
I'm always
Yeah.
here to help you out." And it does not mean that they will still change, but them knowing that, like you said, like they need to know that. They really do.
Yeah, that's such a big point, I think. Yeah, definitely. I could sit and talk to you all day, but we've already run over by 15 minutes.
I'm so sorry. I had
No,
no watch on. I
please
was like, when
don't.
he's just gonna cut me and be like, guys, that's
Oh
it, we're
no,
done.
please. I seriously, I could stay here for another hour, but you know, I've got all sorts of stuff, mum shit to do.
Oh shit.
But yeah, but it's been so good. I am going to watch this over again myself and make lots of notes. But
Thank you
yeah,
so much for having
thank you.
me.
Yeah, and thank you ever so much. It has been so good. And for those people that are just joining on to the end, rewatch the whole thing because Amira is amazing. Thank you very much, and I shall see you soon.
Definitely, I can't wait. Thanks for having me.
All right. Bye bye.
See you soon. Bye.